The dam did not break. It survived almost untouched. But in less than 5 minutes, the valley below was erased, and 1,917 people were dead. The engineers had seen the mountain move for 3 years. They kept the reservoir anyway. This is the story of the Vagent Dam in northern Italy, a masterpiece of concrete built in the wrong valley, beneath a mountain whose warnings became impossible to miss. In the 1950s, Italy was rebuilding at extraordinary speed. Electricity meant factories, jobs, and modern life. In the narrow Vagent Gorge, the private power company SOD planned one of the tallest arched dams in the world. The design was elegant. A thin wall of concrete would curve into the rock, using the pressure of the water to push itself more firmly into the canyon. The structure rose more than 260 meters above its foundation. Photographs made it look almost unreal, a pale, precise arc suspended between dark cliffs. By the time construction finished in 1960, the dam was celebrated as proof that engineering could master the Alps. But a dam is not only concrete. It is also the reservoir, the slopes around it, and every layer of rock beneath the waterline. On the northern side of the reservoir stood Monte Toc. Its local name has often been translated as the Walking Mountain. Whether or not that translation is exact, the mountain was already moving. Geologists found signs of ancient instability. Some interpreted the landscape as evidence of an old landslide. Questions were raised about whether the slope could remain stable as the reservoir filled and emptied. The danger was not that the concrete arch would fail. It was that part of the mountain might fall into the lake behind it. There had already been a warning nearby. In March 1959, a landslide entered the reservoir at Pontesii, another SOD project, generating a wave and killing a worker. According to later academic analysis, that smaller event brought the danger of landslide-generated waves directly to Vagent's managers. Then Vagent produced its own unmistakable evidence. As the reservoir rose in 1960, cracks opened across Monte Toc. Roads shifted. Trees tilted. On November 4, roughly 700,000 cubic meters of rock slid into the lake. The falling mass created a wave, but the reservoir was low enough that the consequences were limited. That was not a forecast. It was a demonstration. SOD's engineers now knew the slope could move into the water. They built a bypass tunnel so the reservoir could continue operating if a larger slide divided the lake. They installed instruments. They watched movement rates and commissioned a scale model to study the waves a slide might produce. Those actions sound responsible. But they also reveal the fatal assumption at the center of the project, that the slide could be managed while the reservoir remained in use. The model tests produced a safety threshold based on a much slower landslide than the one that would occur. Operators tried to control the mountain by controlling the water level. When movement increased, they lowered the reservoir. When it slowed, they raised it again. Each cycle changed pressure inside the slope. The mountain was no longer a theoretical risk. It was a known moving mass, and the project was effectively conducting a full-scale experiment beneath inhabited valleys. In 1962 and 1963, responsibility for Italy's electrical system shifted toward the new state utility, Enel. But the reservoir tests continued. During the summer of 1963, the lake climbed to its highest level. The slope accelerated. By September, movement was measured in centimeters per day. In early October, it accelerated further. The response was to lower the water. That had slowed the slope before. This time, it did not stop. On October 8, one day before the disaster, local authorities were warned to keep people away from certain roads and low areas near the reservoir. But Longarone, directly below the dam in the Piave Valley, was not evacuated. There was no general alarm telling thousands of people that the mountain above the reservoir was in rapid motion. On Wednesday night, October 9, 1963, families in Longarone were at home. Many residents were watching a European football match on television. Above them, instruments recorded the slope moving faster and faster. At 10:39 p.m., a mass of approximately 270 million cubic meters detached from Monte Toc and plunged into the reservoir. It was not a pile of loose stones. It was a section of mountain, kilometers across, moving with astonishing speed. The impact displaced the lake. Water surged up the opposite slope and swept through settlements around the reservoir. Then a vast wave climbed over the crest of the Vagent Dam. The concrete wall remained standing. It did exactly what it had been designed to do against water pressure. But no dam could contain a lake thrown into the air by a mountain. About 50 million cubic meters of water crossed the crest and fell into the narrow gorge beyond. Compressed between rock walls, the wave blasted toward the Pa Valley. Air pressure struck first, tearing roofs and windows away. Then water, mud, stone, and debris swept across Longarone and neighboring communities. The center of Longarone disappeared. Homes, streets, and families were carried away in darkness. The Italian Civil Protection Department records 1,917 deaths. 400 victims were never found. Morning revealed one of the disaster's most haunting images, the dam still standing above an empty, devastated valley. Its survival confused the language of the catastrophe. Vagent is often called a dam failure, but the concrete did not collapse. The larger system failed: site selection, geological judgment, reservoir management, emergency planning, and the decision to keep experimenting after the slope had already fallen once. Later criminal proceedings concluded with findings of responsibility connected to the predictability of the landslide and inundation, and to multiple manslaughter. The disaster was not treated as an unknowable act of nature. Modern researchers still debate the precise mechanics that made the final slide accelerate so violently. But uncertainty about the exact speed was never the same as ignorance of the danger. Managers knew Monte Toc was unstable. They knew reservoir levels affected its movement. They knew a slide could create a wave. They had seen a smaller slide do exactly that. And they knew the slope was accelerating before the night of October 9th. The most important lesson of Vagent is uncomfortable because the dam itself was brilliant. A project can contain a component that performs perfectly and still be catastrophically unsafe. Precision in one part of a system cannot cancel blindness in another. Today, the Vagent Dam remains wedged between the cliffs. Behind it lies the enormous scar of Monte Toc. It is a monument not to concrete that broke, but to warnings that were measured, modeled, discussed, and then accepted as a cost of continuing. The warnings were there. The mountain moved. The reservoir stayed.